the 2021 video game Metroid Dread, you play as the galactic bounty hunter Samus Aran. After your victory over the Metroid and their natural prey, the X-Parasite, the Galactic Federation got hold of a video showing a specimen of the latter. A group of 7 machines called EMI were sent to the planet from whence the transmission was received, ZDR. However, they all went offline not long after, and it is now up to you to discover what is going on. When the idea for the game originated in the mid-2000s, producer Yoshio Sakamoto wanted a game where Samus would be followed by Dread. And while he didn't wish for a horror game, the focus was very much on a fear-based gameplay. Now, we need to define a few terms here. What even is fear or dread? Understanding the meanings of these words shall help us understand the emotions themselves. Fear. The main definitions for the term all have in common that fear is merely unpleasant and caused by perceived danger. It's therefore quite a broad emotion. Dread. Here we can see dread is often classified as a greater form of fear, but specifically in anticipation of the dreaded thing. But wait, don't we already have a term to describe a fear of what might happen? Anxiety. Sure enough, anxiety is most often defined as a fear or unease caused by anticipation. So then, what separates these two? Well, dread is defined through fear much more often than anxiety, which seems to be focused on anticipation. Dread and anxiety may therefore simply be the same emotion, only that dread contains more intense fear. Terror. According to all of these, terror seems to simply be a more extreme and intense form of fear. It's therefore also quite a broad term. Horror. Horror, on the other hand, isn't simply intense fear. Every definition for horror describes shock, or a form of disgust. Horror, then, is specifically a form of terror, or dread, that may arise in particularly shocking situations. So there we have it, fear's family tree. Here it becomes apparent just how much of its genetic makeup dread shares with outright horror. Despite only making up a relatively small portion of the gameplay itself, the entire game seems to have been conceived with the EMI and their dread factor in mind. The game's idea arose when Yoshio Sakamoto thought of the EMI, and almost every early choice of the game's creation was most certainly focused on them specifically. So then, it is clear that these machines were designed to elicit fear. Let's now explore how this was achieved. The very first information you learn about the EMI is that they are made of, quote, the strongest stuff in the universe. While this isn't terrifying right away, it begins constructing the power imbalance between you and them. Your first encounter with one of these machines happens quite early on, and this specimen is broken. You learn that you have a chance at survival, even if you get caught. Succeed on surviving, outrun the machine, and manage to defeat it. This gives false hope. That was the EMI, wasn't so bad. And while your conscious mind knows the rest will be much more difficult to beat, the subconscious is falsely reassured. Your second EMI encounter happens not long after that. You are introduced to the patrolling zone of an EMI, its strange color schemes and creepy background sounds. Here, though you may not be afraid, you are quite anxious. The ambience alone lets you know that this place is not secure. Upon walking through a power beam door, you encounter the white EMI and are reminded of your powerlessness. You must then run away from the enemy while not knowing where you're headed. This uncertainty of your fate and the controlled rapid movements of the threat coupled with the now panicking music, transforms the previously anxious situation into a dreadful one. And thus, if you run fast enough, you escape the enemy. So, what exactly makes these things so terrifying? Well, the best way to create strong emotion in a spectator in any audiovisual art is contrast. If you want to make an audience laugh, you make fun of a horrible thing.
Racism, let's do that shit, huh? Come on, if you're racist and you know it, clap your hands. What the fuck, bro? What the hell?
If you want to make them cry, you show something melancholic and sad while playing seemingly happy music over it.
The sun'll come out tomorrow, so you gotta hang on till tomorrow. Come what may. Tomorrow, I love you.
And if you want to terrify them, you use the uncanny valley. The uncanny valley is created when you chart how lifelike or human resembling something is on the x-axis, and chart the emotional reaction of a human to said thing on the y-axis. On one end are things such as regular rock or your typical computer. On the other, you have humans, bunnies, little cute kittens. And in the middle, you have stuffed animals, or this robot named Atlas. And between the middle and the right end of the spectrum is where the magic happens. Because that's where you find things that are almost lifelike, such as these puppets, this AI-generated image, this zombie, these plushies with realistic eyes, or this robot named Sophia. The power of this valley once again comes from contrast. It looks like it could be alive and a danger, but upon further inspection, it doesn't seem to be. It's simultaneously lifeless and alien-looking, and might almost resemble something you'd want to cherish and cuddle. This uncertainty hacks the human brain into being afraid or anxious, just in case. The closer this thing is from seeming like a real threat while remaining a bit lifeless looking, the more this anxiety turns into dread. Back to the Emmy. Their movements are mechanic and they contort themselves in ways you could rarely see a living thing achieve. This way of moving, both animalistic and robotic, makes the efficiency of its movements uncertain. Similarly, the morphology gets close to a human, with 4 limbs, a head, a thin torso, and standing upright, while remaining alien with a single glowing red eye, claws, and armor. Seeing something almost anthropomorphic move in such a strange, unhuman way only adds to the already existing predictability. The sound also plays quite a role. The Emmy all whistle. They do not groan, they do not bark, they do not talk nor shout, they whistle. The sheer distinction between a high-pitched noise usually heard coming from harmless and cute birds, and this large, efficient, unbeatable killing machine only adds to the paranoia that your mind is bathing in. And of course, the background noise isn't helping. The background noise in the patrolling areas are not music. They seem to be an assortment of random dripping, whirring, and mechanic sounds. This is a very effective technique in audiovisual communication. Music in films, shows, plays, and games is used to communicate emotions. An orchestra playing a fast and rhythmic song with powerful percussions means something intense or exciting is going on. A piano and cello duet playing a slow song in a minor key means something sad is going on. A repetitive and slow-paced song with simple instrumentation means nothing really that interesting is going on. The audience often relies on music for the emotional significance of a moment, and if the audience is used to hearing background music, then its sudden absence is off-putting and signals that they must now solely rely on the visuals. This has the interesting effect of heightening the senses of whoever is watching or playing. They're now paying closer attention. This is why sudden silence is often used in jump scares, or a moment right before an impact, or to reflect how the protagonist feels. The sheer anxiety produced by the ambience is demonstrated after the first third of the game, when Quiet Robe deactivates all the EMI. While you explore the zones, even though you know and see that they are frozen in place, you can still feel anxious. Let's now talk level design. The levels in Metroid Dread, and Metroid games in general, are smartly designed to be used more than once. You traverse each area once, forced to only go one way, and then later again with a skill that lets you unlock a new area. The EMI patrolling areas, however, are quite different. While they allow for full mobility, they are designed specifically to make it easier for the EMI to chase you. Vents and doors and labyrinthic subsections. The EMI can reach any place in the area in a matter of seconds. But it's not just that. There are also a few holes and spider-magneted ceilings to help you hide. Some of the first things you learn about the EMI are as follows. They are unbeatable, so you can either run or hide from them. They can hear you, and if they do, they will come to see what the source of the noise was. If you are seen, they will try to capture you. And if you get captured, you have a, quote, 99% chance of death. You could theoretically just evade it whenever it begins causing you. This, however, is not only risky, but the doors to leave the zone will shut tight once an enemy is pursuing you. Therefore, you are, effectively speaking, forced to hide in order to survive. This is of course harder early on, since you later acquire the Phantom Cloak that allows you to temporarily be invisible. The hiding spots, the good hearing of the EMI, and the Phantom Cloak can result in some extremely tense situations. The knowledge of your weakness reinforces the threat the enemy pose to you. In addition, getting caught doesn't mean instant death. You have two separate occasions to press X right before the enemy grabs or kills you. On each try, you have exactly 300 milliseconds to defend yourself. Knowing that the average human reaction time is slightly below that, you must therefore either highly concentrate under pressure or get lucky. Either way, upon getting caught, you must struggle, and are now much more invested in what's going on. By letting a small bulb of hope shine through, losing against an enemy feels much more real than any other game over. It simply bested you. Metroid Dread may not be a horror game. It's a Nintendo game and therefore lacks the shock value required to be horrifying. But this is no doubt one of the closest things Nintendo could ever make to horror. This game was meant to be dreadful, and I'm happy to say that it is.
Play the game, it's good.